Hi friends, it's Alora and welcome back to the channel. So first of all, I want to say I have a really good relationship with my parents, and we have this lovely tradition that we've had since I was a kid of reading books together aloud at night. Obviously when I was a little kid they were picture books and things like that, but as I started to get a little bit older we started to delve into novels and series, and so today I wanted to go through many of the books, not all of the books, but many of the books that my parents and I have read aloud together. I'm in my mid-20s now and we still do this. When we're together we will read books aloud. This is a wonderful tradition, maybe around the holidays, you know, to start a book and get through it in a week if you're visiting your family for a week or so. I've also at times read books with my parents via FaceTime. That's been really fun. Kind of like a buddy reading system, but where you're actually reading aloud at the same time. The first book that I want to talk about is the book that we're currently reading together right now, and that is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I just want to point out that I'm usually the one that picks the books that we read together, or at least I present them to my family as an option, and I'm not sure how I feel about picking this one. The reason why I presented it to them as something that we might want to read together is because Reagan over at Peruse Project has just been lauding this book, and it's gotten a lot of praise. This book actually won the Hugo Award in 2016, the sequel won the Hugo Award in 2017, and the third book in the series, you know what I'm going to say, won in 2018. So this book and series has had a lot of praise. It is following a series of characters that is living on this planet that is going through this constant state of upheaval. There are cataclysmic disasters that just level civilization all the time, every few hundred years, and they're unpredictable. One of the perspectives is written in second person tense, which is just really interesting. I do want to point out that this book has a lot of adult content in it, and while my parents and I are all adults, it's a little bit uncomfortable, you know, to say the least, to be sitting there reading some of these scenes out loud to my family. So while I would recommend the book, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it as a family sit down read together around the campfire sort of situation. We're almost done with this one, and I would give the book itself like a 4.5 stars, but maybe a 3 as a read aloud book. Alright, let's take it back a ways. So one of the first book series that we read together was Inkheart by Cornelia Funk. This book is so whimsical, the writing is just really magical, her world building is really enchanting and lush, and I love the story. This one is really fun. I would absolutely recommend this as a read aloud book with your family. The book follows a young girl named Maggie whose father is a silver tongue, which means that when he reads books aloud, the book characters come out of the book into the present day. Now in the book, these people aren't fictional, they've actually been yanked out of their world and into this one, and that presents a lot of problems. This is a very imaginative plot, very fun. I would definitely recommend it as a read aloud. Another book that we read in the early days was the Ugly series. This is Pretties because I couldn't find Uglies, but we read the whole series by Scott Westerfeld. This was a really fun one. It's a dystopian story, and the basic premise is that in this world no one is allowed to look ugly, and so on your 16th birthday you go into this medical clinic and you become pretty. They perform all of these operations on you to make you beautiful, but they also make you kind of ding ding blink blink, so you don't have a lot going on up here. It's a really interesting premise how a government can control its population, and the characters are really likable. I would definitely say that this is a fun series to read aloud with your family. One of our more recent reads was Uprooted by Naomi Novik. We read this one together several years ago. This book, it's so exquisite. It is well crafted. This is a book that was not just slapped together, not that any book is really just slapped together, but this is just it says on the front that it's bewitching, and that's such a good word for it. It's enchanting, but in that kind of luring you in, dark, pendulum swinging, are you getting sleepy yet kind of way, and it was just so beautiful. I loved reading this book aloud because it has an incredibly lyrical cadence, and so when you read it aloud it flows and it's so lulling and it's just magical, and it compels you to keep reading. This book does have a little bit of mature content in it, so there were a couple scenes that were a little bit uncomfortable to read with my parents, but overall I would say that this was a really great one for reading aloud because of the cadence of the words. We also read Spinning Silver together, which I have over there, but I'm just too lazy to go pick it up. And this one was also really beautiful, but I would say that I liked it a little bit less than Uprooted. My family definitely liked it a little bit less. It got a little bit more into the technicalities of money lending, and it was a little bit more dry at times, so I would say that that one wasn't as good of a read aloud book. I mean, there are certain books that you can read and they don't feel dry when you're reading them to yourself because you're able to kind of go quickly, but if you're reading it aloud, everything is kind of drawn out. It takes a lot longer to read a book aloud than to read it to yourself, and so everything has to feel important in a book for it to be a successful read aloud story. And I would say that Uprooted was definitely a little bit more successful at keeping everyone's attention than Spinning Silver, but both of them were really beautiful. Another book that we read aloud together was Artemis by Andy Weir. So when The Martian came out by Andy Weir, I read it, and then I recommended it to my dad who read it, and then he recommended it to my mom who read it. So we all read it, but we didn't read it together. And so when Andy Weir released his second novel, we were like, yeah, let's read it together. And we did read it together. It was fun. My dad really liked reading it. Camera died. Rookie mistake. Anyhow, he really thought that it was a fun book to read aloud, but I think that the problem we all agreed was that we went into it with really high expectations from The Martian, and this one wasn't quite as good. It didn't have that je ne sais quoi, you know. One thing that I would want to point out is that this book has a lot of swearing in it, so if that's something that would off-put you from reading it aloud, then don't. Ooh, another series was The Name of the Wind by Patrick Rothfuss. Now, the first two books in this series are out, as well as a novella. We read the two huge books together, but we did not read the novella together. Just as with Uprooted, this is a fantastic book to read aloud just because of the cadence. This book is heavily influenced by music. The main character, Quoth, plays musical instruments and sings, and so you can really feel that very lovely cadence throughout the novel, and it's perfect for reading aloud. But I would say that the one downside to reading this one is that the books are like 1,000 pages long. So if you were thinking, oh yeah, we'll just read it over the holidays, not gonna happen. You have to really have a tremendous amount of time to devote to these. But they're wonderful. The story begins at an inn in a small town where this man is telling his story, the story of his life, to another man named Chronicler who is writing it down. The story begins when he's a young boy and follows all the way until he becomes the King Slayer, essentially this godlike figure. 5 out of 5 star book, 5 out of 5 star read aloud. Another series that we read together was the Fifth Wave series by Rick Yancey. This was a really fun one, I would say, to read aloud. This is a YA book about aliens. This one is definitely a page turner. I would say that the pacing is much faster, so we got through it quite quickly. There's a lot less adult content because this is a YA novel, so this is a little bit more comfortable reading. Definitely a fun pick. Let's talk about what I would probably consider to be my #1 recommendation for reading a book with your parents, and that is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I would recommend this book because there are so many 80s references. I felt a little bit left out sometimes because, you know, my folks were laughing and I was like, why is that funny? I don't get it, just because I didn't catch a reference to something. But it's definitely a crowd pleaser. This is the story, probably most people know, but this is the story of a young boy named Wade and a virtual reality world. Now, in this world, the creator planted an Easter egg, and whoever can get to the Easter egg first essentially takes over the company, inherits all his money, all the power to the game. This is a game that has swept the globe. Everyone is playing it almost all of the time, and so it's a really big deal to find the Easter egg. So this is Wade's hunt, his quest, his journey to find the Easter egg, and like I said, so many 80s references, really fun story. Nothing really that inappropriate, so I would definitely recommend this one. Quite a number of years back, when this came out, we read the Reckless series by Cornelia Funk because we had read Inkheart together by Cornelia Funk. Now, my mother loves this one. I don't really remember it that much. It wasn't very memorable to me. What I remember from this book is when it wasn't my turn to read, drawing pictures of mermaids. Not really my calling, but definitely a fun pastime. What I do remember is that this story was definitely more plot driven. There was a magic portal, there were brothers, there were like gargoyle, killer machine people, and it wasn't my favorite. Another of the perhaps best book series that we read aloud was the Wool series by Hugh Howey. This story follows a large group of people, an entire civilization that lives underground in a silo because of events that occurred up top. Essentially, human beings screwed over the world and we were unable to live on the surface anymore, and so we were forced to go underground and create our societies there. This is an absolutely fantastic sci-fi futuristic dystopian series. Very realistic. There was a lot of science involved, but it was all explained meticulously, kind of think The Martian again. The series follows a whole cast of characters, but you grow to care about all of them, and the writing style was just really good. It drew you in. This series felt complete. It felt like surprises popped up, but they were all believable, and we all really liked it. Additionally, it was one of those series where the middle book wasn't a blah book. It was actually important to the progression of the story, and so every single book in the series was really wonderful. I would absolutely recommend this as a read aloud. One that we read earlier on was the Aragon series by Christopher Paolini. The first one was really fun. The first one was really just a good story, and then as the books progressed, Paolini got more and more verbose. He decided that he wanted to use a thesaurus every other word and make the words as complicated as humanly possible, and so it became much less enjoyable to read aloud. There are 4 books in this quartet, and we read 3.5 of them. We actually never finished the final book, Inheritance, just because everybody kind of got tired of tongue twisters. The last and final book that I would like to talk about today is Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. This was a good one. This was a good pick. It's an adult novel that follows a troupe of traveling Shakespearean players after another cataclysmic world-ending disaster has struck. Post-apocalyptic, that's the word I'm looking for. And what I liked about this is that it was written on 2 timelines. There was a story of some characters that occurred before the apocalypse, and then there was also the story of the players afterwards, and you don't know throughout most of the book how they line up, how they connect, but it's just woven together really beautifully, and it makes a lot of sense when you get to the end. This one was a really satisfying read. It's shorter, so it's definitely more manageable if you wanted to read it, you know, in a chunk, like on a short visit or vacation, and felt complete when you got to the end. Overall, this was a very wonderful book to read aloud. Alright friends, there you have it. Those are some of the books that I have read aloud with my family. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know down below if this is a tradition that you also share with your family, or if you maybe want to start. I would definitely recommend it. 2 things to keep in mind if you do choose to read books aloud with your family is 1, are they appropriate? So think about the members of your family. Is it just your parents? Do you have siblings? Are they older? Are they younger? And then also think about the way in which the book is written. Is it verbose, in which case you might not want to read it aloud? Is it lyrical, in which case you probably do want to read it aloud? Is it simple, which will make everybody's experience a lot easier? Ooh, another thing to consider is what kind of activities you might want to do while the other people are reading. So maybe you want to take turns, and maybe the people who aren't reading could be working on a puzzle, or drawing mermaids, or knitting, or folding the laundry, or whatever. That can also help to pass the time if you're the kind of person like me who needs to keep their hands busy. Alright, thank you for watching this video. Until next time, I'm sending you love.